Hello.
Hi.
Welcome to the next episode of the Brio in the Box podcast. What's going on this week?
Well, the Open is long done, and we just got all the invites for the quarterfinals. So
I just got my Open shirt in the mail.
Yes,
after
perfect timing.
The third week of the Open. Thanks.
Right in time for next year's Open.
Thanks, Bamco. Cool job. Yeah. Okay. So I have the list in front of me. We finally got the full roster. Congratulations to Krista Wempe, Ashley Young, Bonnie McLean, David Riley.
What?
Ian McLean, Jess Stewart, me, Josie, Kelsey, Mike, Michelle, Pat, Russ, Ryan, Cherney, and Shirley.
Nice.
So congrats to those crew moving on in either the individual or age group division, or for many of you, both. So well done. Is this the first year you have ever made the quarterfinals?
It is, yep.
Nice job.
Thank you. All it took was lowered standard of qualification, and I was in there.
Nice. So top 25% was all it took.
Yeah.
You just increased the threshold, and there you are.
I think, I had one good workout and two not great workouts, and it was like, I don't know, I've never really strived for it ever, but I think next year I kind of want to try to get in the top 10%, just so it is a little bit more of a like, well, even if it was still the old standard, I'd still be there. But
yeah,
I think I was like 83% or something like that. So
nice.
It wasn't too crazy.
Yeah, great job. Proud of you.
Thanks.
The Open is fun. It's something to participate in. It's a little like goal for your training to be like, hey, I just want to make this cutoff or that cutoff or whatever. Quarterfinals will happen April 17th to 22nd. That Wednesday, CrossFit releases 4 workouts this time that have to be done in that weekend span. First 2 are due by Saturday. Next 2 are due by Monday. So I think plan is we'll be doing them in the classes Thursday, Friday, Sunday, and then a little wrap up finale Sunday night with everybody all together, hopefully, and a little potluck and fun times after. But more info on that to come.
Yeah. They said that this year was going to be a little bit more like straightforward workouts, nothing too overly complicated.
Yeah, they've definitely taken the feedback from affiliates to make it less complicated. We don't need the floor plans. Let's not spend $350 on duct tape.
Yeah.
So thank you, CrossFit, for that.
Yeah.
All right. What else we got going on in April?
April, we've been doing some theme months lately. So April is Aqua April.
Yes. 2024, year of the habits, trying to pick one a month of things to think about, trying to get people in the mindset that your health is about much more than just the 3 to 5 hours a week that you spend in the gym. It's the accumulation of all these many things. So this month is about just straight up drink water.
Yeah.
You dehydrated bitch.
So you have to drink every day 2.4 liters. Is
that what it is? You figured it out?
Yeah, okay. We figured it out. There's the hot debate about what the real metric was, and it's 2.4 liters, which honestly is not that much water. I made it just slightly above sort of the norm. So the typical recommendation is 8 ounce glasses of water, 8 cups of water per day. So I just made it 80. You had to put some effort into it. It wouldn't happen unless you're kind of thinking about it, but it's not an absurd amount of water. The Challenge 75 Hard, if people are familiar with that one, has you drink a gallon of water every day. That's 4 liters. That's 128 ounces. That's an unnecessary amount, borderline on dangerous if you're not managing your electrolytes properly. So we didn't go that extreme, but just to be paying attention, drinking water. And then the beast mode challenge was to potentially replace another beverage with water, just to see if you can. Coffee, energy drinks, diet sodas, alcohol, see if you could have an alcohol-free April. Any of those things that you just feel like you would benefit from maybe laying off it for 30 days just to see if you can. Yeah. I've always drank quite a bit of water, I think. So it's not that big of a deal for me. It is just nice to actually pay attention though and make sure that you're consistently doing it.
Yeah.
And then also trying to balance it out throughout the day, because there's been times where I get to the end of the day and I'm like, oh fuck, I'm like thirsty as hell. And then if you drink a lot of water before going to bed, it interrupts your sleep. So you're way better off just balancing it out throughout the day. And there's been a lot of talk of frequent urination for the people that aren't used to it.
Your kidneys are thanking you right now. I have seen, actually, when I look at blood work of athletes fairly often, high creatinine and low GFR, low kidney filtration rate. GFR is your glomerular filtration rate, so how well your kidneys are doing. And when you work out and you work out at intensity, you do break down your muscle cells, and it does enter your bloodstream, and your kidneys do have to filter it out. So part of recovery and getting rid of all that and supporting your kidneys is like you do have to drink water, and probably more than the average person that doesn't work out. So get it done earlier in the day. A few people the first few days were like, I had to get up to pee 2 times last night. Yeah. There will be some adjustment after the first few days of like your hormones that regulate your hydration and stuff and your sodium retention and water excretion, your diuretic hormones will balance out. So it's usually not that much. But for years, I've had a rule of I have to drink a Yeti of water before I have coffee in the morning. So at the very least, I would start with hydrating. But I don't know that I was drinking as much water as I thought I was, because actually keeping track for the first few days, I was peeing way more than usual.
Right.
So I was like, that's something to be said for bringing precision and accuracy to something, keeping track and being much more honest with yourself, where many people are like, yeah, I think I drink a lot of water. You're like, but do you? Mm-hmm. You should probably find out. And all you have to do is put a little piece of tape on your water bottle and tick one off every time you fill it up, actually see for real how much water you're getting in.
Yep. Yeah. I don't find it to be too bad. This is, what are these ones? 18 ounces or something?
18 ounces, yeah.
Yeah. So I get up in the morning and I like drink a whole one of those as I'm getting out of bed. I slam one and
it's so that you can have coffee right away, right?
I mean, I kind of got into that habit when we did the grit grind, and that was the rule, was you had to drink water first. And so I don't know. I like it. I don't get up in the middle of the night and drink water. So I'm always thirsty when I first wake up.
Yeah. This is day 4 for me with no coffee.
Weird.
I know. I thought I would try it. I'm not committed to the whole month, but I thought I would try one day. See how it went. And then that was fine. And then I did 2 days. Now I'm on day 4 and I'm not dead. So nothing bad has happened yet.
What's the date? This is my 4th day without alcohol, and I am not intending to make that an ongoing thing. That's just by accident.
I could easily go a month without alcohol.
Yeah.
That wouldn't faze me in the slightest.
You're not a big alcohol person at all.
Yeah. I'm sure I have, just without thinking about it many times.
I'm not even a weekly drinker, just once in a while. Or if I go to something, I like to have a beer or two, but yeah, I've done it before. It's not that big of a deal.
Yeah. Someone was like, why though? Why would you give up coffee? And I was like, just to prove I'm still in charge.
Yeah.
Like, I just don't like the idea of being beholden to anything, of having these habits that I need and I'm like incapable of functioning without them. I like to know that if I choose to have coffee, it's because I enjoy it or I like the ritual of it, but not that like I need coffee. And if for some reason one morning I don't get it, that I'm like non-functional.
Yeah.
And I feel like that about anything with like nutrition and, if I needed a snack every 2 hours or I can't function, that's not healthy. And if I needed coffee or I'm, incapable of being a human, that's not functional. So
yeah, I think I'm definitely hooked on caffeine, in that if I was to like cold turkey all of a sudden stop taking caffeine, I'm sure I would have some negative effects for a little while. But for me, it's not even so much about the caffeine. I just love the ritual of getting up in the morning and taking my time to make my coffee, and that like first sip, it's so good. Like I just enjoy coffee, but I only have my one each day. I don't drink it all day every day.
Yeah. So
I don't know, maybe one day I'll try to give it up for a little bit, but I just like the process and I like the reward of it so much.
And I think that's the thing. You just have to, any of your habits, you just have to bring them into your conscious attention every once in a while and look at them and evaluate. Is this good? Is this bad for my life? And if you're like, hey, it's pleasant, it's relaxing, I don't drink coffee the rest of the day, it's not interfering with my sleep, I still drink water, then you're like, this is probably fine.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Okay. So interesting stuff. What else have you been reading or listening to this week?
I watched a podcast this week that was fairly relevant to one of our recent podcasts. We talked about peptides because it was one of the questions from the community. And Huberman just actually did a deep dive into it. So I watched that and spent some time learning because, he tends to do a good job of digging through the data and trying to find the information out there. So yeah, it was super informative, and it's an interesting topic for sure. There's a lot of them out there. There's a lot going on, and I kind of made note of a few of the ones that seem interesting or relevant to regular people.
Okay, so let's just talk about Huberman for a moment. If you follow any of this stuff, a bunch of things came out about him being like a psychopathic individual, compulsive liar, keeping 6 different women on the go at a time, like, one of those. And you're like, damn it, men. Why can't you keep it together?
Whoa.
But
some men.
There's always these ones where you're like, oh, this seems like a cool, interesting intellectual dude with something to contribute to the world. And you're like, damn it, he's a womanizer. You're like, fuck.
Yeah.
So on behalf of women, I refuse to engage with any of his content now. Won't look at it, won't like it, won't watch it, won't contribute any of my views or likes or comments to any of it. But I do think like in general, and I've said this about other people that have happened before, this is why we shouldn't worship humans. We should worship ideas. And a flawed human can have a good idea, and we can keep the good ideas or we can keep the good information And we can separate that from the person, flawed as they may be. Everybody's a flawed human being. Nobody's going to be perfect. And some of them better or worse than others. I think probably what makes people nervous about Huberman now is if he's such a pathological liar, can we trust the information that we are trusting him to filter for us, like from the scientific literature, and he's a science communicator and all that kind of stuff. So it, like anything else, it always pays to listen, maybe take it in, and then check for yourself.
Yeah,
check
for
the
sure.
data yourself. Don't take any single person's word for anything.
Yeah. I don't have a single podcast that I religiously listen to. I don't exactly listen to Huberman anymore, but because this was an interesting topic for me, I listened to it. And the things that I like about him is he does put citations and everything in his episode notes, so you can really dig in deeper if you want to. But yeah, I just made note of a few different peptides that are interesting, and by no means are we recommending people take peptides. It's just sort of like, this is a potential thing that a lot of people are looking into. A lot of anti-aging clinics and a lot of doctors, especially in the States, are starting to use these. Even Ozempic is a peptide, and people are being prescribed that all over the place.
So yeah, not encouraging use by any means, not like just informational purposes only.
Yeah.
Do what you want with it kind of thing. Check for yourself.
Yeah.
I'd say. So what are the big ones that are out there?
So the big ones that I was looking at were the ones that were relative to exercise and building fitness and recovery and stuff. So there's kind of like the HGH peptides, the human growth hormone ones. So human growth hormone, if you take it, it just shuts down your own system and gives you a bunch of exogenous stuff. These ones, they just help your system be more efficient and release more on its own.
So endogenous production.
Endogenous, yeah. So there's a cap of how much your body will produce on its own, and it just helps you find that cap a little bit easier. So there's two that are actually FDA approved. I don't know if I'm going to say these right or not, but sermorelin and tesamorelin. They're both FDA approved for people that do have like dwarfism or any kind of issues that stem from like low HGH levels. And people will take these and it'll help them with that condition. So those are the ones that are considered to be more safe because they are FDA approved. And then there's another one called CJC 1295, which is in the process of being, but they're not officially approved yet. But those three will work in like a short-term sort of way. The way your growth hormone works is it's very short acting. It's only in your system for so long. So when you first fall asleep, your HGH levels are the highest early in the evening, and then they start to dissipate as you go through the night. So it's the same with this stuff. You take it and within 20 minutes it's on the descend. It's not really working as much anymore. But then there's another one called ipamorelin that is a much longer lasting one. And so people will take one of those first three and ipamorelin in combination, and it kind of gives you like the double, like the longer duration and the shorter duration one. So yeah, HGH is your human growth hormone stuff. So it's really good for like making things younger in your body, right? When you're young, you have a ton of human growth hormone. So you repair really quickly, you recover really quickly, your hair is thick, your skin is beautiful. And then as we get into our 30s, our HGH levels start to decrease. And so your ability to recover and your physical appearance and everything starts to like slowly fall apart. So by taking these, it's apparently like a longevity sort of thing. It helps with building muscle. It helps with building cardio capacity, burning fat, looking better, feeling better, all that kind of stuff. The problem is, big problem with human growth hormone especially, is that it will also work on cancer cells.
Yeah.
So if you have any cancer cells in your system, growth hormone can make those way worse.
Fuels their growth,
Yeah.
right? So if there's like two states your body can be in, like anabolic and catabolic. Anabolic is like growth, which is great, like you said, for all those wonderful things we want, muscles and bones and skin and tendons and all that kind of stuff, but it also grows other things. So when you're in a growth state, like high insulin or high growth hormone, it also can fuel the growth of cancer cells. So I think that's the big question mark right now around these peptides, because they haven't been around long enough. We don't really have long-term data. Most of the research is in rodents, which does not transfer well to humans just because rodent lifespan is so short and for many reasons. We don't really have long-term human data, so we don't know if they're like, well, do the cardiovascular benefits and the muscle preservation benefits, which are great for longevity, outweigh the potentially increased risk of cancer? We don't know that there's an increased risk of cancer, but we know that too much growth hormone fuels cancer cells. So it's a big question mark. We just don't really know. So I think when you list all these wonderful benefits, you're like, it sounds amazing. It's the fountain of youth. And you're like, oh, but there's no free lunch probably. So it's maybe why evolutionary wise, your growth factors decline around middle age is because chances are you've accumulated some kind of cancer cells at that point. So maybe for longevity purposes, you do need a reduction of growth factors. Potentially you could make an evolutionary argument for that.
Yeah. These things are this way for a reason. Your testosterone levels and your HGH levels are supposed to go down as you age because that's part of the aging process and that prevents cancer and things like that.
Yeah.
And it's when we start to manipulate those numbers that like, you're going to look better for longer, but are you going to die younger? You know, are you taking years away at the end? So I don't know. You just never know.
And we don't know. Yeah. Isn't long enough term data to know.
There's no way to know for sure. So certainly if you have a history of cancer or a large family history of cancer, it's like super high risk and not worth trying.
Yeah.
But that's the HGH stuff. The other ones that I thought were really interesting were more about just pure repair, less about like building muscle and leaning out and everything. So the biggest one is BPC 157. And this one is super common in like athletes with injuries and stuff. So it's really good for like tissue regeneration, good for increasing your immune system, good for blood flow, reducing inflammation, everything involved in tissue repair. It helps with that. And there's very low chance that it affects cancer, but it's not zero. Mm-hmm. So there is some, they're not 100% sure. So there is a little bit of risk because it does tend to have a little bit of an effect on your HGH. Mm-hmm. But that's probably the most common.
But otherwise it influences collagen production primarily, right?
Yeah, it does affect collagen, but that's just one of the many. The big thing with these, like the problem with all of these things, it's not like one peptide affects one system. One peptide could affect 1,000 different systems, and you can't make it just affect one part. So you might up this lever and a bunch of other levers go as well, which is why like...
Welcome to the world of all pharmaceutical drugs. That's what happens.
So it affects a ton of different stuff. You just have to, and there's no way to even know everything that is affected by it. So some people might take it and it's fine. And then other people might take it and you get like hives everywhere and you can't take it anymore. It's just a no-go for you. So you just never know. But
I first came across BP157 there's this website that makes a keto coffee creamer. It's like a powdered MCT oil. And I was looking at ordering it. It's called Keto Brains. And they were selling this like coffee creamer in a bundle with BP157. I was like, what even is that? And then Googled it and I'm like, it's a peptide. And of course it's on the banned substance list for athletes. And I was like, that's kind of crazy that they're selling this like peptide, that could get you in trouble if you're a drug tested athlete alongside like a coffee creamer. It was just quite strange. But that was where I first came across it.
Yeah, for sure. The other one, as far as repair goes, that was interesting anyways to me it's called GHK-CU, and it's a copper peptide. Mm-hmm. This one's heavy on collagen. So it's really good for nerve and blood vessel outgrowth and reconnecting and everything. Mm-hmm. Hair and tissue, especially. This one's interesting because all these other ones, they're injectable. Mm-hmm. This copper one, you can get it as like a cream and you can get it as like a hair foam, and it helps with regenerating your skin and reducing redness and potentially hair regrowth and stuff. So when you said that one, I was like, hey, I think that's in some of my skincare products. I like went and looked. I have this multi-peptide moisturizer cream, and that's one of the ones that's in there. So and you can get it as like a pure serum from, if people are familiar with The Ordinary, it's a very common skincare company out of Canada. They make a pure 1% copper peptide thing. So if you get it as an injectable, it's a little bit more about whole body regeneration and stuff like that. And then if you want specifically like skin or hair or whatever, it's better if it's topical. But there are some people that say that they've never felt better, they've never looked better since they started taking it. This one, as far as they can tell, it's relatively safe. There's not a lot of risk for increasing like cancer cells or anything. But again, you just never know, right? There's just not enough data. There's not enough science behind it to really know A, whether it does anything or not for sure, and B, what the long-term risks are. So those are the interesting ones. There's all kinds of crazy stuff out there, and you can go down a serious rabbit hole with it. But
I think you just have to know that it's kind of the Wild West, and they might not be illegal. Some of them are banned for performance athletes, but the big thing is we just don't really know. There aren't the studies on what the long-term impacts of these things are.
What about you? Anything cool you've been learning?
So I've been down this rabbit hole on vitamin D
Yeah.
and the sun. And it kind of actually links in with the skincare stuff a little bit. I read this article called Is Sunscreen the New Margarine? And I was like, ooh, this piques my interest because
Good on toast.
they're assuming that we all know that margarine is the most complete bullshit food out there, horrible for your health that you could eat.
Yep.
So anyway, I read it. And in the course of this online discussion that I had seen this article linked, someone had provided a whole bunch of PubMed citations. But basically the argument is vitamin D is very clearly linked, or vitamin D deficiency is very clearly linked to a whole host of diseases. So we're pretty confident that high vitamin D levels or adequate vitamin D levels are pretty important. We know for sure that low vitamin D causes rickets, right? In kids, that's why prior to the invention of vitamin D supplements, people would give kids a spoonful of cod liver oil because it's one of the few natural food sources that are high in vitamin D. But outside of bone health, there's almost no evidence that vitamin D supplementation does anything. So you can supplement someone's vitamin D levels into the normal range, and the data over and over and over and over again shows that that doesn't do anything to reduce their risk of cancer and heart disease and diabetes and all these things. Even though we know that low vitamin D very clearly associates with those things, like pretty good predictive value, but correlation is not causation. So the argument is maybe vitamin D is not the thing in itself, but it's a marker for sun exposure.
Right.
Humans are basically solar powered. We need to be in the sun. And vitamin D is created in a reaction in your skin with cholesterol from UVB light, and you make vitamin D. It's really not a vitamin, it's more like a hormone. So it's kind of like a hormone marker of our sun exposure. And sun exposure does a wide variety of different things. Influences our circadian rhythms of our sleep, influences the circadian rhythms of various genes, even down to your digestion, that need to get turned on and off at different times of day. It stimulates the production of nitric oxide, which is your major vasodilator, which is great for cardiovascular health because it relaxes the endothelium of your blood vessels instead of having them be like tight and hard and they don't respond well, you end up with high blood pressure. So then if what we need is sun exposure, the question becomes, what are we doing to ourselves if we're constantly covered up or covered in sunscreen every time we do go in the sun? And it's controversial, and especially if you follow any of the skincare forums, because the number one thing you're supposed to do for skincare is sunscreen, sunscreen, sunscreen all the time. They're like, wear it even when you're indoors, if you're near a window. And there's like crazy people that will cover up and drive with gloves on and like won't expose themselves to the sun for a freaking second.
Are they vampires?
Basically, they're like skincare vampires. But then... So it's the risk of skin cancer, right? And now you get down this rabbit hole. If we block UVA and UVB light, are we actually maybe increasing our risk of cancer? Are we allowing ourselves to be out in the sun longer than we otherwise would if we weren't protected? Blah, blah, blah. So it's like a really interesting rabbit hole, but basically that humans need sun exposure for 20 to 30 minutes. You can store an adequate amount of vitamin D. It's a fat soluble. So you can store vitamin D basically enough that gets you through the winter. Lucky for us here in Canada. But if you don't go outside or you're covered in sunscreen all summer, almost all Canadians, like a ridiculously high number, like 92% of Canadians are vitamin D deficient.
Right.
But if you do get adequate sun exposure, and especially intermittently, or if you're lucky enough to be able to go on a little sunny holiday in the middle of the winter, then you won't end up with the problems associated with vitamin D. But you do, it seems much more important that you get it via the natural production method of skin exposure to the sun than taking it as a supplement.
Do you still, okay, so if it's, let's say you get up and go for a walk in the morning, 9 a.m. in the summer before it's really hot and the UV is super high, do you still get enough sun exposure from that, or does it have to be midday sun?
They say you need about 20 minutes of midday sun exposure on arms, hands, and face. And so if you're outside at a lower UV time of the day, you would just need to be outside for longer or have more of your skin exposed.
Right.
But so 20 minutes outside at midday should be reasonable. It's not enough to sunburn. And then speaking of sunburn, you want to get it down a whole different track. The more seed oils you eat, the more linoleic acid you have, the more it gets incorporated into your cell membranes and it oxidizes so easily, the more you sunburn.
Yeah.
Super, super, super common. You see when people quit eating seed oils, the next few years, they're like, like I used to burn so easily. They're like, I can be outside for hours now and I don't get sunburned. Yeah. So that's kind of an interesting effect.
It's kind of a problem that feeds on itself, right? Yeah. Like your
poor diet, lack of sun, then your poor diet makes you less tolerant to the sun, and then you're not getting enough sun, and then you're slathering yourself in sunscreen. So now you don't have adequate sun exposure. Now your nitric oxide is low and your vitamin D is low. And it's like, all of these things end up coming back to you kind of can't outsmart nature.
Yeah.
Which is sort of the thing about the peptides too, is maybe you can't outsmart nature.
Yeah.
So yeah, anyway, certainly a controversial take, because there are some, especially dermatologists, that would be like, sunscreen is the most important.
Right.
Like, I don't know.
Yeah. And it sucks because that's the way conventional wisdom is, right? It's like they'll base it on some study from 30 years ago and they'll preach it like, no matter what, this is the thing. And then new research comes out and the people that are preaching it for 20 years have a hard time letting go. And so it just can sort of starts to be this like battle.
Yeah. The whole Max Planck quote, science makes progress one funeral at a time.
Yeah.
I feel like if you want a good filter for should you listen to this person as a legitimate scientist, it's that if they are faced with something that conflicts with their strongly held conventions, are they super curious about it, or are they a debunker and they just, the first thing they do is try to cut it down and talk about all the reasons why it can't possibly be true? A good scientist is curious, and a good scientist looks for reasons to disprove their hypothesis and prove themselves wrong constantly. We just had Daniel Kahneman, Nobel Prize winner, just passed away. He was 90 years old. That was his whole career, was like questioning your thought patterns and finding ways to prove yourself wrong. He basically spent his whole career as a scientist trying to disprove everything. And he did, actually. The work that he won the Nobel Prize for, he ended up going back on later in his life. Where he was like, I don't think I was right about that.
Yeah.
That's why he was like such an amazing and well-respected scientist. He wrote the book Thinking Fast and Slow, which was quite popular a few years ago. And yeah, cool guy.
Yeah.
Just passed away.
Interesting.
Anyway.
So get in the sun.
Do you want to know another interesting fun fact about the sun? This just popped into my head. When you view the level of light that's outside without sunglasses, your eyes start to redirect melatonin into the production of melanin. Those are made from the same base amino acid, but instead of, it starts to direct more into the production of melanin, which is your skin. But if you're outside with sunglasses all the time, that also is why people will sort of anecdotally report, when I go outside without sunglasses on, I don't sunburn as much. There's literally a physiological explanation for why that would be. So maybe the more you're outside with your shades on, your eyes aren't getting the sense that you're outside and in the sun and not activating the proper systems and increasing your production of melanin in your skin, which protects you against getting burned by the sun.
Interesting.
So another reason why you should be. It also helps anchor your circadian rhythm. So being outside without sunglasses on too, for at least some of the day, getting natural light exposure might also prevent sunburn. Interesting. Cool. Weird little things. I like those weird little nuggets.
Yeah. Cool. Okay. So a topic that's come up in the gym recently that we alluded to in the last podcast was bone health. And that's actually a good transition, because vitamin D, bone health, that's usually like hand in hand, right?
Yeah, for sure. And I've done actually several of my term projects throughout getting my master's in nutrition on osteoporosis. So it's become like a weird little area of specialty for me. I'm super fascinated by bone health. Vitamin D facilitates the transport of calcium through the digestive system. So it's like the delivery driver that makes sure it gets into you. So you do need, that's why dairy is fortified with vitamin D. Dairy doesn't naturally contain vitamin D, but it's added to it because we know it's good for calcium absorption.
Right.
There's several things that need to go into building strong bones. So you need vitamin D, you need calcium, facilitate calcium transport. Once calcium is in you, you have to have vitamin K2. I've talked about vitamin K2 at length. It's my favorite vitamin. If you get to have a favorite vitamin, mine's K2. It carboxylates something called matrix GLA protein, which is like the foreman on the work site that directs calcium to go to the bones. But if that K2 isn't there, calcium goes rogue and it ends up in the endothelium of your cardiovascular system as atherosclerotic plaques. It ends up in your kidneys as kidney stones. It ends up in your connective tissue as bone spurs. So it's there, but it's not in the right place. So you need the fat-soluble vitamins, D and K2. K2 is only found in animal products. It's in the fat of grass-fed ruminant animals. So grass-fed beef and butter, grass-fed dairy products. But it's actually the product of bacterial fermentation. So there is this crazy little Japanese dish called natto that's fermented soybeans that has the texture, they describe it like snot. So it sort of looks like snotty beans, and it smells, I guess, like rancid gym socks, because it's sort of that like blue cheese fermenty kind of thing. So it's an acquired taste, but it's a very rich source of vitamin K2. So I guess I take it back. There is one non-animal based source of K2, and it's natto.
You pay the price.
You pay the price. But otherwise, I would prefer grass-fed butter, grass-fed yogurt, grass-fed beef. All that stuff's very high in K2.
Yep. And then like, is cod liver oil another one? Vitamin D.
That's vitamin D and vitamin A.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. But then where that calcium goes, it's a mineral product called hydroxyapatite. Makes this like hard mineral spackle, basically with phosphorus and magnesium and some other stuff. But it has to go on the scaffolding in your bones on the bone matrix, which is made of collagen. It's protein. People think bone health, they think calcium. Over 50% of the dry weight of bone is protein. And it's collagen-based protein, type 1 collagen. And those amino acids, there's 3 of them needed to make that collagen, also mostly only found in animal products. Particularly rich source is bone broth. When you make a good homemade bone broth with the marrow bones, but also the joints and knuckles and, you know, anything like if you had a turkey carcass, you throw in like the bits of skin and all that kind of stuff, and you let it bubble away for 24 hours, you get all the really rich collagen-based amino acids. You know you have a good bone broth when you put it in the fridge and it has this like jelly top part to it. Amazing, amazing stuff. Great for your bones, but also your connective tissue, your skin, anything. Like most of you is built out of collagen. Basically, it's hugely important. Also, fun fact, that's one of the best first foods you can feed to a baby is that jelly kind of stuff. It's great for them and they love it. So we need good animal-based protein sources, particularly like eating things with the skin on, eating meat on the bone. Bone broth is all awesome. We need vitamin D. We need calcium. Mostly comes from your dairy products. You can get it from like salmon, canned salmon, if you mush up the bones in there with it. Bone broth too. It leaches the calcium and the phosphorus out of the bones into the broth. So rich mineral source there. Mineral water, things like Gerolsteiner, if people are familiar with that, has some calcium in it. You need your K2, and you also need vitamin A, another one of the fat-soluble vitamins that controls, there's this process, this remodeling. Your bones, we think of them as this like static, dead sort of tissue, this just scaffolding of your body, but it's actually very alive and very dynamic, and it's constantly turning over. So there's osteoclast cells that break down old bone, like doing the demolition, and then there's osteoblast cells that are building up and rebuilding and remodeling bone tissue. It's just to maintain your house over the years. You constantly have to be like taking something apart and fixing it up or sanding it down before you put a coat of paint on. So you need this both, and vitamin A controls the bone breakdown side of things. So we got talking about bone health and osteoporosis, and it affects women to a much greater degree because when estrogen drops in menopause, estrogen is a big factor in bone growth and the builder and the blast side of things, but it also affects men. And so we were talking about if you get to that kind of between 50 and 60, I want to call that midlife, but maybe, you know, slightly more than halfway, and you have maybe a break in a small bone. We were talking about, oh, what if you like break a hand or a foot, right? Especially doing something that shouldn't have otherwise injured you, something relatively simple. That's kind of a red flag, right? And you should, if your doctor doesn't already order one, you should pursue a bone mineral density test, a DEXA scan. You can pay for them out of pocket, but at that age, your doctor would probably just send you for one. I think the question was, someone had said that bone mineral density in the extremities doesn't correlate with bone mineral density at the large bones, and that's entirely false. And I thought so, and I went and looked it up, and it is, of course, your skeleton is your skeleton.
Right.
If you have bone thinning in the extremities, you have bone thinning in the major bones, and if you have bone thinning in the major bones, you have bone thinning at the extremities. So when they do a DEXA scan, they're looking usually at the femoral neck, so the top of your femur, and your lumbar spine. And they're looking at how much mineral, how dense is the mineral on that scaffolding, on the lattice-like structure of your bone. And when it starts to get very porous, you can literally see it. You can Google pictures of what osteoporosis looks like. It just looks thin and it looks weak.
Right.
And then the risk is that those thin and weak bones are at a much greater risk of fracture, of course. And so why they care is that major bone fractures past the age of 65 are a serious mortality risk.
Right.
If you're over 65 and you break a hip, depending on the data you look at, there's at least a 1 in 5 chance that you'll be dead within a year. That's very high. Some of them are like 30% of people will be dead within a year. So having low bone density is super risky. But if you have something that happens or you find out that you have low bone density, osteopenia is where your bone density falls below average they do it on a natural or a bell curve. So if you're 1 standard deviation from the norm or 2 or 2.5 or whatever, as you get further out, you got to have a score below 2.5 to be diagnosed with osteoporosis. But -1 to -2.5 is osteopenia. So you're in the risk zone. You're on the wrong trajectory. You have to ask yourself why. So you needed all of those nutritional factors that we talked about. but you also need to stress the skeleton. You can't, just like you can't eat protein and grow muscles and sit on the couch and grow muscles. It doesn't work like that. You can't eat all of those wonderful things, your animal-based meats and your grass-fed butter and all this wonderful stuff, but not do anything.
Right.
It won't stimulate bone growth. You have to do resistance training. Cardiovascular type high impact things like running does absolutely nothing for bone health, not at all. You need to stress the skeleton. You need to be under load. So that's like squats and deadlifts and carrying things, yoke walks, farmer carries. You need to have the skeleton under load, basically. So if you know, there's all these like factors that go into creating good health. Your exercise, your nutrition, your sleep, all these various factors. Your genetics play a part for sure. But if you're like, I have low bone density, but I've been lifting weights for 15 years, right? Or 10 years or 12 years or whatever. And you've been doing it at Brio, you know, that I'll tell you right now, the programming is good. As long as you've been showing up consistently and working pretty hard, then you're like, what other factor wasn't in place? And it's probably the nutrition.
Yeah.
And women have been a victim of this big time, but it, you know, men are not immune to it either, of thinking that plant-based nutrition is better, whole grains are the way to go, or we should limit our meat intake, or we should choose chicken and poultry over red meat. And you're like, wrong. Now you got weak bones.
Yeah.
You know? So, unfortunately, there's just been a lot of really, really terrible nutritional information, and it's affecting people's health in the long term now.
Yeah.
There's drugs your doctor can put you on, things like Fosamax, that inhibit osteoclast activity. So they try to prevent the breakdown side of things. But there's not good evidence that that actually does much to reduce the risk of fracture. It'll get you a better score on the DEXA scan, but the thing that you actually want is to not have broken bones.
Right.
And so if you're not properly remodeling your bones, you end up with all this bone tissue, but maybe not of good quality, because the old shit needed to get broken down so new stuff could get built. You don't just need to keep the old shit, basically. Mm-hmm. Same thing if you just keep slapping a coat of paint without ever sanding it down first, it doesn't build good quality, right? So the drugs are of questionable efficacy. I'm not saying you should or shouldn't take them. I'm just saying there's some things you should know about whether they actually accomplish what you want them to accomplish. But what you really need to do is focus on the builder side.
Yeah.
You do the weight-bearing exercise, you need to be under heavy loads, and you need to make sure the nutrition is dialed. And then the research is actually pretty good that you can take women that are like over 85. I saw one paper that I absolutely adore where they had them eat red meat and they put them on a strength training program where they had these ladies doing squats and deadlifts. Mm-hmm. And they, within 3 years, I think the study was, had noticeable changes, improvements in bone mineral density. I was like, hell yeah, ladies. Not going to be brittle Betties after all. Doing your squats and deadlifts. And it wasn't some nonsense like, we're going to use resistance bands.
Yeah.
Shit. It was like, no, they were teaching these ladies to do like real functional movements. It was great.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's always better to do it naturally. Like the less drugs you can be on, the better.
Yeah.
You know, it's just, you have to do the work.
Yeah. And I think if you like, sort of my feeling was if you get one of these red flags, you don't just be like, oh, my doctor will just give me a pill for that and everything will be fine. No, you really need to like do some searching internally of how did I end up in this situation? Some things are within your control and some things are not, and that's fine. But then also what is within your control and what could you improve and how could you do this yourself, right? Yep. And I think the thing about CrossFitters and stuff is we generally tend to be the people that don't want to take the pills. We're the people willing to do the hard work. We're the people that know that that's the harder but better path ultimately. So yeah. Get them strong bones. Mm-hmm. Squat them weights. Eat that meat. Yeah.
That's a t-shirt.
Okay, so that's some of the things you got to eat for good health. Someone else asked us an interesting question, which was, okay, so you guys are pretty healthy. What's the one or two things you would never eat? Like, will not do it. No way. What's yours?
Yeah, that's a good question. For sure, sweetened beverages. Yeah. That's one of my no-goes. I don't remember the last time I had a pop.
That was one of mine too.
Yeah. I remember working in the restaurant industry and free pop, Coke, iced tea, whatever. And when I like started to chub up and was like, you know, ready to turn my life around, the first thing I did was I stopped drinking pop. And in the first couple of weeks, I lost 4 or 5 pounds, you know, like it was significant just from that. And it's been so long now that I can't even imagine drinking like that sweet of a beverage. You know, I used to be into it for sure. And it's been so long now that I can't even imagine having like going to the store and buying a Coke and drinking one. Yeah.
Someone in the gym said they do have that little indulgence, but they're giving it up for Aqua April.
That's
and I
good.
was like, hell yes, get yourself off that stuff.
I think it's just one of the best things you can do. It's one thing, let's say somebody's like out at a wedding or whatever, and they like to drink Ryan Cokes and stuff. And okay, I guess once in a while, you're already having alcohol. Like it's super bad anyways. And if that's your treat and the thing that you like to drink, okay. But just like on any random day, I just think that's one of the easiest things you can give up.
Yeah. That was also one of my answers. No sugary, no liquid sugar. So soda, juice, sugary coffee drinks, smoothies, like booster juice kind of stuff. Like I just would never drink sugar.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying I don't eat sugar sometimes. Like certainly on cheat days and stuff, I'll eat ice cream or I'll eat a cookie or whatever, but I just would never drink sugar. Although maybe I have to be honest, the exception for that might be the 1 or 2 times a year I sit on a patio and have a margarita. I do love a good margarita. So maybe if it has tequila in it.
Yeah, that's what I mean. As a cocktail, okay, once in a while, because I also don't drink very often. I went through a phase, not even a phase. I used to like Starbucks, macchiatos and pumpkin spice lattes and stuff like that. But I would always get them like half sweet or a third sweet. And I remember the last time I had one was probably like a couple years ago. We're like, I think I'm going to have a pumpkin spice latte. And I went and got one. I couldn't even drink it. It was so gross. My taste has changed and I just can't anymore.
Can't do it.
Yeah.
My immediate answer to that question was fries.
Yeah.
French fries. Specifically from a restaurant.
Yeah.
But generally, I would not eat anything that comes out of a restaurant deep fryer. Fast food or fancy restaurant, doesn't matter. I would not eat anything fried in a restaurant because the oils that they keep in the fryers are not changed on the regular. They're in there for 7 days or more at a time, repeatedly heated, creates all these like highly toxic 4-hydroxynonenal, these like oxidized linoleic acid metabolites, oxalams, that it's just pure toxic shit when it gets into you. So I would never eat fries from a restaurant.
Yeah. That's an easy swap out too. And you can still have fries. If you make beef tallow fries, that's freaking amazing. They're so good and like worth the effort. Yeah.
But we render the beef tallow ourselves. I cold ferment the potatoes for a day ahead of time and they're like awesome. Yeah. We just don't do it all the time. I also would never eat like a Caesar salad. I would never order that. That's just pure soybean oil on crunchy water, So if you're like, oh, I'm not going to get the fries, I'll have the Caesar salad. You may as well have just had the fries. It's no different. Don't fool yourself that that's somehow a healthier option.
Yeah. If you're going to do a salad, like a greens with a vinaigrette kind of thing would be better.
Yeah. I'm not big on leaves and I don't trust any salad dressings in a restaurant really either. I would either do honestly like no sides or if they have steamed, broccoli and peppers or something like that, like vegetables on the side. And even then it probably has fucking vegetable oils on it. But I try to avoid restaurants as much as I can anyway.
That's the problem with restaurants is they just use cheap oils and that's vegetable oils.
Yeah. I usually, I'll try to ask, hey, can you make sure they either have no oil or put real butter on there or whatever. But
the other one that stands out in my mind, I've never tried it and I never will, is all of those like faux meat, like
oh god,
burger or whatever. What do they call them?
Impossible Burger, Beyond Meat.
Yeah. I've never tried any of them and I never will.
Yeah.
I feel like
because you are a smart consumer.
I like meat and I feel that meat is healthy, and to substitute it with some subpar like processed garbage, it just
industrial slurry of waste products.
I don't even care if it tastes the same. It doesn't matter. Like I'm never going to support that industry because it's just so bad for you. It's just not worth it.
Yeah. That's one of the prime examples of a processed food company trying to profit off what they think you value, putting a health halo or this moral high ground on what is basically just a slurry of industrial waste products and slapping a plant-based marketing label on it. And then they get you to pay, and then they get you to pay 2 to 3 times as much as just real meat. It's absolutely ridiculous.
And I feel like I get, things like bread, right? There's no like meat-based alternative to bread that it's the same consistency and the same texture and the same like deliciousness. So it's like, if I want something like a sandwich, like I'm just going to make a sandwich, like that's fine. You can do that kind of stuff once in a while and it's not a big deal. Yeah. But to like change something that doesn't need to be changed and try to use the weirdest concoction of ingredients to try to make it as similar as possible, like just eat a burger, man. Like, I don't know. Not for me. And then the last one that I thought of has to do with Dash. He's a little kid, right? And so he gets excited about these things and I like think about it and like, that sounds horrible. I appreciate good candy. You know, I like wine gums. I like 5-cent candies. I like chocolate. Like all that stuff is good. But I would never eat like cotton candy or any of those just garbage candies that are like, you get them at Halloween and they're like the last things to be eaten because they're not even that good. Like the chalk candies and like candy corn and stuff like that, where it's just, there's nothing good about them. They're not worth it at all. The thought of them is just, no, I'm good. I don't ever need to eat cotton candy in my whole life.
There's probably some candy corn aficionado out there being
For sure.
like, blasphemy,
Yeah,
David.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Or you go to some fine dining restaurant, they have some weird dessert that has cotton candy on it. You're like, what? Like, this doesn't need to be a thing.
Sometimes there's a fancy little cloud thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm, I eat really well most of the time, but I'm pretty chill. Like I don't have orthorexia about most things. If I needed to in whatever situation, I'll eat almost anything.
Yeah.
But I know to avoid fries, salad dressings, Impossible burgers. I'm not going to eat any of that, any fake shit. Like,
for me, it just has to be worth it. Cause I go into it knowing whether it's good for me or not. Mm-hmm. And it just has to be worth it. Like it's worth it for me to have a beer once in a while. I know it's not good for me. Mm-hmm. I know I'd be better off without them, but it's worth that taste and that feeling that I get. Like I like beer. Or if I'm going to have turkey dinner and not have any stuffing, like I'd rather not have turkey dinner. I'd rather have a steak or something instead. So the types of things that are worth it, I'll indulge and then just know that this is not an all the time thing and it's fine. But some stuff is just not worth it.
Oh, I know the other one I said. I was trying to think of it. It was granola bars.
Oh, yeah.
I would just never eat a granola bar.
Yeah.
And I never let my kids eat granola bars because look at the ingredients on any of them. It's oats and sugar.
Yeah.
If I'm going to eat a cookie, I'm just going to eat a cookie.
Yeah.
I'm not going to eat a cookie in the shape of a rectangle pretending to be a high fiber snack or some nonsense.
Yeah. Or like you eat one of those harvest grain ones and then you have to vacuum your whole house.
Just crumbs. Harvest crumbs. Yeah. I try to just live in reality. Like I'm not going to eat something thinking that it's a health food when it's actually just a pile of industrial garbage like soybean oil or the Impossible burgers or anything like that. If I'm going to eat junk, I'm going to know it's junk and I'm going to make it the best possible tasting junk. And if I'm going to eat food, I'm just going to eat things that are food.
Yeah.
And that's kind of it.
It is kind of funny going to the grocery store now, like as far as we've come, because we've come a long way in the years. I remember sitting down and eating bowls of cereal, like that was a dessert we would do sometimes as a treat. And now I go to the grocery store and I don't walk down any of the aisles at all because it's just like a blanket. Like,
nonsense.
I don't care if I'm going to have something delicious. I'm going to have some cookies or something. I'm not going to have cereal. I'm not going to have granola bars. I'm not going to have Pop-Tarts. I'm just like, those don't even exist in my mind anymore. It's all just like inedible nonsense. So I don't even look at it. It's weird because
it just doesn't even enter your vision as it's not even a choice that you're making.
Yeah. And I guess you go long enough without something and it stops existing.
Out in the world of nutritionists and stuff that I'm obviously heavy involved in that side of things as well now too. There's certainly the types that are like, there's no such thing as bad foods and all foods fit. Bullshit. Yeah. That's complete nonsense. Yeah. Or we have different definitions of food. I'll give you that one if we agree that strawberry milkshake cornflakes are not food. That's not food. That's a thing I saw in the grocery store the other day. Frosted Flakes, that's what it was. Strawberry milkshake Frosted Flakes. As long as we can agree that whatever that is, it's not food.
Yeah.
But all the things that are food, I'm pretty agnostic. I personally prefer a lower carb, keto-y kind of approach, but I've really been, quite down a rabbit hole of people that are finding success with really, really high carb, low fat things. And I'm pretty agnostic to different things can work for different people. But what they all have in common is that they're all actual food. And none of the things that work include Impossible burgers and strawberry milkshake, Frosted Flakes and granola bars and just like all the processed nonsense. So
I think that the longer you can get away from that kind of stuff, your palate changes. Like
you're just like, what even is this?
Yeah, like if I was to take a bite of what is it, strawberry milkshake,
Frosted Flakes,
I'd be like, this tastes horrible. This is
like, why does this exist?
It's not going to taste like strawberries. It's going to taste like some sort of weird strawberry flavored, crunchy grossness. Like I feel like if you're in the depths of that kind of stuff and you're used to it, you'd probably try and be like, oh man, this is amazing. But if you can get off of that stuff and come back to it, like it happened with I used to be a big Captain Crunch guy. Like when I was a kid, I was never allowed to have it, but Captain Crunch with Crunch Berries was like my jam. Loved it. And so I remember, I don't know, maybe 8 years ago, we were in Maui They don't sell that stuff in Canada anymore, probably because it was killing people. They don't sell it in Canada anymore. And they had a box of Captain Crunch with Crunch Berries in Maui. I was like, sweet, I am totally going to like reminisce and buy this box. And I couldn't even finish a bowl. It was horrible. It was so bad. But at the time, I was used to eating shitty food, and that was just like, it tasted good.
Yeah.
And then you get away from it, and you're like, oh no, this isn't good at all. This is bad.
Yeah. And I think a lot of your palate is anchored as a child. So
sure,
I'm like really on a soapbox about childhood nutrition and the things that the parents choose to feed the kids, because it's against the child's will. Their decisions are made for them. And if you anchor a child's palate to processed foods, basically of any kind, and what is it now? 2 or a third of foods marketed to babies are ultra processed food.
Yeah.
So it's on the parents to be more discerning and just make sure that those things don't sneak in. And then later in life, if an adult of their own volition wants to eat, Captain Crunch with Crunch Berries, that's on them. But at least the kids are being given the best possible start to have their palate anchored to like real food tastes good, normal food.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Cool.
Okay, we do have more questions. We've been talking for a long time.
Yeah.
We'll save them for next week. Some stuff on transitioning to keto, menopause is a big topic. We're all aging up
really
together
looking
here.
forward to the menopause one.
Hey, you need to understand.
I do.
You need to understand what's going on with us.
I
girls.
do. I'm not going to be able to contribute a lot. I'm going to have to do some research going into that.
You can learn stuff too. I don't know anything about menopause. I don't know any more than you. We'll just learn together.
Yep.
Yeah. All right. We'll see you in the next one.
See you guys.